We're going to talk about the concept of commoditization. That's the process by which a product or a service becomes a commodity. A commodity is something in which the product or service that one organization or company produces is undifferentiated in terms of features and functions from the similar product or service that another company or organization produces. When a product or service becomes a commodity, the only basis on which companies can compete is on price. And nobody wants to compete solely on price. Think about it from this perspective. Let's just say you're a web developer or a security analyst or a software engineer, and you don't want to enter into a situation where the market says, you've seen one, you've seen them all. In that case, the only basis by which you can compete, the only basis by which you can get that job is by your price. And by your price means working for less money or the willingness to work for less money than the other people with whom you're competing against. As an example of commoditization, let's take a look at what happened to the IBM PC. IBM was very good at designing products, manufacturing or assembling products, and most of all, they were very good at marketing computers. Apple had already introduced the Apple IIe and was gaining in popularity. There was a buzz about the concept of a computer that was small enough and affordable that could actually sit in the homes and offices across America. The Apple IIe could do enough computer-like things that people were buying them. What really got IBM's interest is that Apple could put a computer into a small business. This was a business segment that IBM was very interested in. With small businesses, the competition was really non-consumption. That is, people weren't using computers at all. It was an unserved market, and IBM was smart enough to realize that it was a valuable one. So they did what they did best. They focused on designing, producing, and manufacturing the PC. They adopted a modular design, which essentially they took stock off-the-shelf electronics, much like going to Radio Shack and buying parts. They essentially outsourced the components. Now, IBM was very good at managing outsourced vendors. So good that in their other product lines, they kept most of the profits, while their vendors lived on razor-thin margins and were beholden to IBM for their existence. IBM had every reason to believe that the same would be true for this product, the personal computer. Their modular design was non-proprietary. Again, IBM felt that its name recognition and marketing expertise would win the day, and for a while they were absolutely right. In fact, not too long after IBM introduced the PC, I remember Business Week running a cover story with the picture of the IBM personal computer on the cover with the title, "The Winner is IBM." As I mentioned, IBM outsourced all of their components. Two of the essential components were the integrated circuit produced by Intel. The other was the operating system produced by Microsoft. Both were leaders in their respective fields. So let's discuss what happened. And let's take a look at the concept of commoditization put forth by Clayton Christensen in his book, The Innovator's Solution. Real good book, by the way. If you ever have an opportunity to read it, I highly recommend it. But we're going to plot the PC's performance over time. Now, customers had certain expectations of what they wanted a personal computer to do. And it's natural to think that these requirements or expectations would increase over time. Initially, with respect with personal computers, customer expectations revolved around functionality, that is, what can the computer could do, and reliability. Early on, as good as the PC was, it failed to live up to those functional and reliability requirements, but it was all that was available. But with time, the product evolved and got better, until such time that it got better than those initial requirements or expectations. Now, there's an important nuance here, And that is the customers were neither unhappy in the early stages, nor did they expect improvements to stop once the product crossed this imaginary line. Rather, there exists a performance gap in the beginning, and customers would pay a premium for whatever product narrowed or closed that gap. And customers continue to pay a premium up until the point that the product crossed the line and created a performance surplus. At this level, they expected improved performance, and the existing level of performance was good enough for their purposes. Now, once a product crosses this line and becomes good enough, customers are no longer willing to pay an increased price for incremental gains. Customers simply come to expect improvements and won't switch to a new product unless those improvements are there. What drove this improvement in the PC over time? Well, it turns out what was IBM's strength was its ability to become the standard and win the initial PC market through using its modular, non-proprietary design. But this led to PC commoditization. The modular, non-proprietary design allowed competitors to enter the market quickly and at an affordable price. So companies like HP and Compaq were able to quickly copy the PC. They initially competed on functionality and reliability. And as each company introduced a new product that got a little bit better than the competitors' products beforehand, the other companies that provided PCs were able to quickly copy those new improvements as well. So as those technical advances were copied by others, we have this escalating improvement in reliability and functionality. The computer crossed the line and became good enough that IBM, HP, Compaq, and all the other manufacturers of PCs had to compete simply on price. Modularity served them well, at least initially. Once one PC was good as another, they only were able to compete on price. What happened is that Intel and Microsoft became the equivalent of arms merchants in the PC war, selling to all the PC makers. As IBM, HP, Compaq, and all the other PC manufacturers competed away profits and margins so that they could lower their prices, escalating profits and margins flowed to Intel and Microsoft. So even today, when you watch TV or read in print media, you can see who is taking the lead on advertising for the personal computer. We all know that about Intel's Inside campaign, and Microsoft is certainly taking the lead on advertising the generic PC. While all this was going on, software was going through a similar process, but with a different result. Software like Lotus 1-2-3 or WordPerfect were both going through its own development, commanding a premium for earlier products and developing products that were below customers' ultimate expectations. They too crossed the line at some point and became commodities, no longer commanding a premium price. However, Microsoft was able to understand that while separately spreadsheets and word processing software were commodities, one aspect was below expectations, and that was the ability to integrate word processing software and spreadsheets into a single unified package and be able to transmit information from your word processing software to your spreadsheet software, or more likely the other way around. But Microsoft introduced Microsoft Office, which did just that allowed users to move information and be able to be compatible amongst the various components of the Microsoft Office suite. And ultimately were able to supplant Lotus and WordPerfect, which had become standards, and Microsoft's Office, in fact, became the standard. Now, lest you draw the conclusion that IBM failed because of its modular and non-proprietary design, let me attempt to dissuade you of that notion. Apple was neither. It introduced the Mac to much fanfare and acclaim. Apple was proprietary, and it was not modular. It was integrated. It did not outsource its operating system to Microsoft, but created and maintained its own. This allowed it to be more innovative, but it also meant that it was harder to develop software for the Mac, and thus lagged in the area with respect to the PC. A proprietary and integrated computer is more expensive than a modular, non-proprietary one. And while there were some willing to pay a premium for Apple's computers, in the 1980s and the 1990s, very few were. And in fact, Apple never gained a foothold in the enterprise business, which the IBM PC or one of its clones had a computer on every desk. And in fact, the Apple almost went out of business. In fact, it was the iPod that saved them. They were able to capture the MP3 music business with a proprietary and integrative approach, iPod and iTunes. And that drove and sustained their innovation premium. Now, a company that was able to do something similar was Dell. Their innovation was not with the hardware, but with the business model of being easy to work with and fast with delivery. In fact, Dell made the modular, non-proprietary aspect of the PC work to their advantage. They could quickly build and deliver a custom-built computer. Innovation was in customer service and in the manufacturing and assembly processes, not with the device itself. They took advantage of the internet as well, and they were ultimately able to recapture margins and profits that their predecessors competed away. This is an interesting story, but this is also where the trend is. The story of commoditization is one that repeats itself over and over again. Apple created and revolutionized the communication business by innovating and producing the iPhone. A smartphone for sure, but not the first one. RIM with its BlackBerry was before them, and Nokia had several smartphones as well. What Apple did was create a computer with a voice app that you can hold in your hand. An iPhone, when it first came out, looked nothing like and acted nothing like the BlackBerry or Nokia smartphones. It created an app ecosystem that none of the others had. Enter Google and Microsoft. What they're trying to do is to cancel out Apple's innovation premium. And I suspect they will when they will compete and can try to compete on functionality and reliability across multiple fronts. Not the least of which is their relationship with manufacturers and carriers, to a point that the computer with a voice app will someday become a commodity if it hasn't become one already. That is unless Apple can stay ahead with the others on the innovation curve. They certainly did that with the iPad. Google and Microsoft scoffed when the iPad was first introduced, but now are scrambling to catch up. Enter the Amazon Kindle Fire. Now, this is an interesting move. Amazon is not just introducing a device, but a platform to access its vast amount of content. The Kindle Fire is priced low enough to be an attractive alternative to the iPad. We call this the razor blade strategy. Sell a razor cheap enough and make money on selling blades. And that is essentially what Amazon is trying to do with the Kindle Fire. Sell the device cheap enough and make money on the content. Now, what about Facebook? How does it play in this space? How does it protect its innovation in social networking at the same time while it's creating a mobile strategy? Let's be clear. ICT competitors can compete on something other than functionality and reliability. Much like Dell did, technology doesn't simply have to compete on reliability and functionality of the product. It can compete on service, and as we've seen, it can also compete on price. Not sure Apple will ever compete on either service or price. Product innovation seems to be their distinctive competence. Google could, but they will certainly be preoccupied with Motorola Mobility and integrating that company into its ecosystem and being able to take advantage of the assets Motorola Mobility brings to bear. Amazon certainly has potential. Now, and Facebook's business model relies on advertising, and we should never think that its users are necessarily its customers. All of these companies are somewhat envious of Microsoft, which has a solid foothold in the enterprise market, something that Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook all wish they had.